Hello friends, you're watching Ruslan Belov's channel, and today we're going to take a detailed look at the situation in Ukraine as of January 24th, 2026. A lot has happened, and many of these developments are extremely significant, so let's get straight to the point without any long introductions. We'll start with another large-scale strike carried out by the Russian Federation during the night of January 24th, 2026. I want to emphasize right away, this was an unusual strike, not because a record number of missiles or drones were used. In terms of sheer quantity, it doesn't look fundamentally different from other attacks. What makes this strike stand out from most of what we've seen since February 2022 is the tactical use of aviation. In terms of the execution pattern, this is a truly interesting and revealing episode. Let's take a closer look. And to get straight to the main point, this strike was practically impossible to intercept. Defending against it would have been extremely difficult, and in reality, almost impossible. So what happened? In the morning, pro-Ukrainian sources published a map showing multiple trajectories in different colors: yellow, red, and orange. The yellow lines represent drones. The orange lines indicate Iskander-type ballistic missiles. There is also a separate orange trajectory on the map. According to these sources, it represents Zircon missiles launched from the Black Sea. But the most interesting part is the green lines. These green trajectories point to Kh-22 missiles, and it is precisely the use of the Kh-22, or more specifically, the way they were employed, that made this strike truly distinctive. What exactly took place? Overnight, pro-Ukrainian sources published material stating that at around 2 a.m., Tu-22M3 bombers carried out launches, firing Kh-22 missiles toward the Kiev region. Some sources also hinted indirectly that Kh-32 missiles might have been used as well, but at this moment that information still requires confirmation. And here comes the most important part. According to reports, the aircraft took off from the Dyagilevo airfield, and between 4 and 6 Tu-22M3 bombers participated in the operation. However, it is claimed that only 3 aircraft actually launched missiles, while the rest were most likely acting as decoys, conducting diversionary maneuvers, or fulfilling some other tactical role. After completing the mission, the aircraft returned to base. At first glance, this may look like dry technical detail. The last time this type of aviation was actively used was back in 2022, so the question arises, what exactly is special here? But if you look closely at the published map, one notable feature stands out: a red dot is marked on it. That point appears just above the northern part of the Chernihiv region. However, in reality, it corresponds to territory in Bryansk region. And if we compare this with data from Ukrainian monitoring resources, the picture looks like this. During the night of January 24th, the Russian Federation carried out strikes using supersonic Kh-22 missiles, with launches reportedly performed from Bryansk region, roughly from the area near the town of Unecha. In other words, the Kh-22 missiles were fired essentially from a border-adjacent area. And as a reminder, their speed can reportedly reach roughly Mach 3.6, up to nearly Mach 5. Put simply, that's up to around 5,000 kilometers per hour, more or less depending on the flight phase and profile. If we calculate the distance from the presumed launch area to Kiev, even just to the left bank part of the capital, it comes out to roughly 289 kilometers. In practical terms, this means the Kh-22 missiles could have been launched from the Unecha area toward targets at a distance of around 280 to 300 kilometers, depending on which specific site in Kiev was struck. Then it's just basic arithmetic. With that speed and that distance, it's reasonable to assume the missiles reached their targets in approximately 3 minutes. In other words, aircraft take off, reach the required launch area, fire, and within 3 minutes the target is hit. Ukrainian sources claim that as a result of this strike using supersonic Kh-22 missiles, a highly important energy infrastructure facility in Kyiv was destroyed. And that is the first key point. Any air defense system, even the most modern one, simply does not have enough time to properly respond when a supersonic missile is launched from such a short distance. 3 minutes is not enough to detect the target, classify it, make a decision, assign tracking and interception, and successfully engage it. In other words, from a timing standpoint, A real reaction is almost impossible. But it's not just about missile speed, and it's not only about distance. The launch location is equally important. Take note, the distance from the presumed launch area to the Ukrainian border is only about 50 kilometers. That means the Tu-22M3 bombers were effectively able to operate along the Russia-Ukraine border, staying extremely close to the line of contact. And this leads to another crucial point. If we follow the logic of open-source reporting, Ukraine has received a substantial range of weapons since the start of the conflict, including F-16 aircraft, Patriot systems, NASAMS batteries, and many other assets. So formally, Ukraine did have tools capable of countering aircraft of this type. I'm not claiming that all of those capabilities are necessarily available and fully operational right now. Some systems may have been taken out of service, missile stockpiles may be depleted, Russian forces may indeed have destroyed Patriot missile depots, or F-16s may no longer be able to operate effectively due to wear, lack of airfields, infrastructure issues, or maintenance constraints. Any of that is possible. But the core point is different. Under the current conditions, Russia can employ long-range aviation and Tu-22M3 bombers in such a way that they can operate along the border calmly, without expecting an immediate response from Ukrainian air defense. And if that is the case, then any energy facility on Ukraine's left bank, let's be direct, is effectively under threat. Because if a Kh-22 reaches the target in 3 minutes, there is virtually no time to react, meaning critical energy infrastructure on the left bank of the Dnipro could end up largely unprotected. Moreover, the fact that this operational scheme is being used may indicate a trend. If today aircraft are launching missiles essentially from the border zone, then in 3 to 4 months, depending on how the situation develops, they may begin operating even more boldly, launching from closer ranges and potentially even deeper over Ukrainian territory. In that case, strikes could be launched, for example, from the northern part of Chernihiv region or even the northern part of Sumy region. That would cut the flight time not to 3 minutes, but potentially to 1.5 to 2 minutes. And those time windows are already within a range where interception becomes almost unrealistic. Even with proper equipment available, the reaction time and engagement sequence would simply be too late. That's why this strike differs from most attacks we've seen since 2022. 3 factors came together at once: high speed, short distance, and a launch tactic carried out from an extremely close line, almost right next to the potential engagement zone of Ukrainian air defense systems. All right, let's return to the overall strike picture and take another look at the map. Another notable element here is the use of Zircon missiles. According to some reports, strikes were also carried out against energy infrastructure facilities. In the morning, objective control footage was published showing the consequences of the night's attacks. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense released statistics on the air targets used by the Russian Federation. According to their data, a total of 396 missiles and drones were employed during the attack. The Ukrainian side claims that 372 targets were intercepted. At the same time, a large number of videos appeared online. In some of them, we see early morning in Kyiv on January 24, 2026. And pay attention, a complete blackout, a total outage. In the footage, if anything is glowing at all, it's likely only traffic lights. Somewhere a yellow light, somewhere green. Although it's possible those aren't traffic lights, but emergency lights from vehicles or some other light source. Still, the overall impression is clear. The city is plunged into darkness. The same videos show cars moving through the streets, and it gives the sense that vehicles are almost the only source of light in Kyiv at that moment. There is virtually no electricity, and this isn't the dead of night anymore. Dawn is beginning, yet the city still appears completely powerless. Other footage also surfaced. Because of strikes on the energy system, certain substations are literally burning out, unable to handle the load, and the situation appears to be reaching a critical point. There are also videos showing strikes on urban areas using drones. In some clips, we can see targets being hit by Geran-type drones. Different angles, possibly different districts of Kyiv, but overall, the night was extremely tense. One video author also claims they are filming from Kharkiv, where a series of strikes and impacts on critical infrastructure were recorded. According to them, overnight strikes hit CHP-5, CHP-6, as well as the 750 Kobarv substation near the town of Bila Tserkva. The Kiev substation is also mentioned. These elements of the power system connect the Ukrainian capital with nuclear power plants, and once again the same reports repeat that Iskanders were used, and that Kh-22 missiles may also have been involved. Next, we move on to the front line. Today, the Russian side published another very interesting piece of footage. It was recorded in the area of Malavishka. This is central Ukraine, in the region of Kropivnitsky. In this footage, we can see how Russian drones were able to penetrate deep into Ukraine's central regions. The video shows strikes against an airfield in the Malavishka area, and drones hitting equipment on site. According to the author, they damage, destroy, or otherwise disable helicopters stationed at the airfield. It is reported that as a result of this raid, the Ukrainian side may have lost one Mi-24 and one Mi-8, or that they were seriously damaged. And even if the aircraft were not completely destroyed, restoring them is not a quick process. What matters is that this was a very deep strike. The distance from that airfield to possible Russian forward positions in the southern part of Zaporizhia region is at least 250 to 345 kilometers. In other words, it was an attack deep inside Ukraine carried out using Jiran-type drones. This appears to be one episode in a series of strikes that may have begun either last night or slightly earlier. These kinds of attacks occur regularly. It's just that maps or confirmed footage are not published every time. I also want to remind you that over the past 24 hours, at least yesterday, there were numerous reports of strikes on Kryvyi Rih. It is quite possible that this was a combined strike specifically targeting that sector of Ukraine. Roughly 70 drones out of 101 reportedly headed toward Kryvyi Rih. Another portion continued onward, toward Malavishka, and then moved further north. Now let's move directly to the line of contact. We'll begin with the Zaporizhia direction, where Russian units continue to slowly advance toward the railway line running between the settlements of Zaliznichna and Pokrovsk. However, it's important to note that the pace of the offensive here has noticeably slowed down. The main reason for this is that the Ukrainian side has transferred a significant number of units to this sector, reinforcing it with manpower and equipment. Over the past few days, we repeatedly pointed out and discussed Russian drone strikes on tanks that Ukraine had moved closer to the front line. So this is a very heavy and intense battle zone. Ukraine is doing everything it can to hold the line in the railway area and prevent a breakthrough. Meanwhile, the Russian army is trying to break through this defensive line, reach the railway itself, and establish control over settlements located along that rail corridor. And if Russian forces manage to secure positions along the railway line, it will open access to the so-called Zaporizhia operational space, from which further movement westward becomes possible, both toward Kharkiv and toward the city of Zaporizhia itself. It won't be an easy advance, but the maneuver options will expand significantly. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk direction, more specifically the Dobropilya sector, where the key events are currently unfolding near the settlement of Hryshine. Several videos were published today showing FPV drone strikes, as well as FAB glide bomb strikes on Ukrainian positions in the central part of this area. I want to remind you that in recent days, we observed a fairly noticeable dynamic here. Russian units were actively pushing forward. At this point, Russian forces have reached the central part of the area, and intense fighting has already broken out there. In fact, the battle for this sector is entering its decisive stage, and if the central part is taken, the pace of the Russian advance could pick up again. Now we move to the Kostantinovka direction, where Russian units continue active offensive operations both in the northern and southern parts of the city. Inside Kostantinovka, the front line is essentially divided along the Kryvyi Torets River, which largely shapes the internal boundary within the urban area. If we speak about the southern part of Kostantinovka, the situation there remains largely unchanged. Over the past several days, the Russian army has made numerous attempts to storm the western sector. The area often referred to as the Kostantinovka Citadel. The strikes were carried out with massive intensity. Aviation, drones, armored vehicles, and heavy fire support were all used. However, we can see that for several days in a row, the map has barely changed. It appears that the Ukrainian side has managed to hold the front line in the southern part of Kostantinovka, despite serious logistical difficulties. By the way, today footage was published showing strikes on a bridge in the area of the Lozova and Kryvyi Torets rivers. In these frames, we can see a Russian drone flying underneath the bridge, where explosives had been placed in advance. After the strike, the charge detonates, and we see a fairly powerful explosion. It's important to clarify, this bridge was not destroyed yesterday or the day before. We discussed information about the destruction of this crossing back on January 20th. That means the incident itself happened around the 19th, and the bridge across the Lozova River was destroyed on that date. And now, several days later, video footage has surfaced showing exactly how it happened. Earlier, there were assumptions that the bridge may have been destroyed by aviation or a direct airstrike. But judging by these frames, the reality was simpler. The crossing had been mined by the Ukrainian side, and Russia essentially triggered the blast, activating the charge and causing detonation. As a result, logistical problems in the southern part have, of course, intensified. Nevertheless, for now, this still does not prevent the Ukrainian side from holding its positions. But if we talk about the northern part of Kostantinovka, Russian units continue their steady advance, literally block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, gradually expanding the area under their control. That is exactly how the map has been updated over the past 24 hours. Russian forces are moving forward in the area of the Daka settlements in eastern Kostantinovka. It is also clear that they are gradually shifting away from the railway station area and moving further north, expanding their presence closer to the city center and continuing to develop the offensive. Overall, we can already state that roughly around 15% of Kostantinovka is under Russian control. The remaining 80–85% of the city still remains under fairly confident control of the Ukrainian armed forces. So if we summarize, we can say that the battle for Kostantinovka is still only in its very early phase. Next, the Sloviansk direction. Overall, there are no major changes here, but there has been a slight adjustment to the advance in the area of Svitopokrovsk and Reznikivka. Russian units are moving slowly but consistently, pushing closer to the central part of this settlement. The map updates were made based on video material showing a series of strikes on forward positions of the Russian army. On the Kupiansk direction, no significant changes have been observed either, but truly important news is coming from the northeastern part of Kharkiv region, where the Russian offensive is gradually gaining momentum. This is how the map has been updated over the past several days. This was the picture as of the end of January 20th, and starting from that point, the map began to change almost daily, both east of Vovchansk and south of this area. Just yesterday, the Ministry of Defense, as well as the North Group of Forces, confirmed advances in the area of the settlement of Semenivka. Based on that report, we made the corresponding adjustments. In addition, by the end of January 23rd, information appeared about almost complete progress in the area of the settlement of Kharkiv. And today, the overall picture is being supplemented by reports from various pro-Russian sources. At this moment, most of Kharkiv is already under Russian control. The Ukrainian side holds roughly around 25%, and another about 25% of the territory can be uslovno considered a grey zone. Also today, the Russian Ministry of Defense and the North Group of Forces confirmed Russian advances in the area of the settlement of Stolitsy. Accordingly, we will update the map and make small changes in this section. The adjustments will look roughly like this, since the information has been officially confirmed both by the Ministry of Defense and by the North Grouping. Ahead of Russian units, there is a large bridge and a broad forested area stretching north of the settlement of Rubizhna, along the Siversky Donets River. This is a fairly dense forest zone, and it is ochividno that advancing in such conditions will be extremely difficult. Nevertheless, we will keep watching whether Russian forces are able to continue pushing forward, and whether they will become more deeply engaged in active fighting in this area. It is also possible that the Russian army will try to bypass this forested area from the flank, increasing activity on the Leptsivka sector, more precisely between the Leptsivka and Vovchansk bridgeheads. The goal could be to bypass the forest, attempt to envelop it, or create an ugrozu okruzhenia. Many different scenarios are possible here, especially since the city of Kharkiv itself is already nearby. And that's all for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and I wish you all the best. See you next time.